Yeah, we've got Glenn back. He's been at least a half a dozen times from down under. It is Sunday morning down there, and it's Saturday evening here in the United States. And we're just glad to have Glenn back. And Glenn, I guess, first of all, welcome back to the show. And if you can give us just a real brief introduction, particularly for the new people, what your experience was with Amway and that sort of thing. And then we'll just let you take over the show because you're our guest and we want you to talk about what you want to talk about. So welcome and go right ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, Peter and Scott, good morning or good evening, depending on where we are in the world. So my story. My story is that my father has been well and truly brainwashed by the Amway. As you call them, this is an interesting point, Scott. You call them the Amway tools. I've been thinking this week, mainly this idea came into my head when I was listening to you and Julie Anderson, which I thought was an absolutely outstanding interview. I think Amway tools is too kind a term. I think we should rephrase it to Amway brainwashing material or Amway propaganda, because a tool implies that these recordings are valuable and beneficial and will make your life better. These so-called tools, they destroy people, they brainwash them, they ruin them, as can be seen with my father. So I think to call them tools, it's too kind. It's not, and it's not reality. They're not tools. They don't help you and benefit you. And
Glenn, I use the word tools because that's the most common name for those. Yeah. Formerly, they're called business support materials. If you look at Amway's rules, that's what they call them. Now, I think they also refer to tools in the rules, but that's the generic name across Amway. If you say Amway tools, everyone knows what you're talking about, and that's why I use it. Is I want to make people understand that's what I'm talking about.
But can you see my point, though, that they're not a tool? They're very, very negative. They have very negative impacts on people's lives. The idea that they help you in other areas of life is nonsense. I mean, I've even heard DeVos say, one of the Amway founders, that we had higher rates of diamondship before the tools. The tools don't make you more likely to succeed in Amway. I really think that, I urge you to rethink that, Scott. Maybe call them Amway tools / brainwashing material / propaganda material. Because I really think that calling them tools, they're not playing their game.
I hope using the word scam gets the idea across that it's not just a tool, it's actually a scam. Cause I never say Amway tools, I say Amway tool scam. That's my preferred. And by the way, I don't believe in brainwashing, and that's pretty much the agreement of most psychologists and psychiatrists, is that brainwashing is not a real thing. People use it as kind of a generic term. I think what they really mean is when you're told a lie and you believe it. Now that does occur. That occurred with me and millions of others. But as far as brainwashing as a technical term, it does not exist.
Yeah, I disagree with that. My dad is, if he has been 100% brainwashed to the point where he will not even look at evidence that goes against the way his brain has been washed. He won't look at data or statistics or any evidence that goes against what the brainwash has told him to not listen to anything negative. So if I go to him with some data or some facts, Glenn's negative, he's a loser, don't listen to it. That's how strong the brainwashing is. A normal person that just believes a lie does not have that level of mind control or brainwashing, and would look at the data, would look at the facts, but he won't even look at the data or the facts. That's how. And
I agree. Yeah, I would agree that there's outliers. There's people that do totally buy into it, and I guess you could use the term brainwashing, but as a generic term, it really doesn't have any meaning as far as the professionals, right? The psychiatrists and psychologists, they say no, brainwashing is not a real thing. But there are people like your father. I think it's fair to use that word, but just caution people that that's a very unusual case.
There's lots and lots of professionals who think that brainwashing is a real thing. Lots and lots of highly educated people who 100% believe in brainwashing.
Well, I suggest you do an online search for that, because I found differently. and I'm willing to debate your sources that you find online, but what I found online is, again, there's always people that disagree, but the vast majority of these professionals say, nope, brainwashing really is not a thing.
You could find a highly educated professional to make any point. So, my understanding.
I'm just talking about the vast majority. That's what I'm talking about. You can always find exceptions.
The vast majority of people in this space think that brainwashing is a thing. I mean, how else do you explain that? How Jim Jones got hundreds of people to voluntarily commit suicide? That wasn't them just believing a lie. That was them being very, very, very cleverly brainwashed. And the tactics and the tactics that Jim Jones used are very, very similar to the tactics that have been used on my father. So,
well, again, there's always exceptions, and that is, I think, an exception. Now, whether you want to call that brainwashing or believing a lie, I think that can be argued on both sides. But again, if you have a source that says brainwashing is a real thing and the majority of professionals agree that it's a real thing, I'm willing to debate it because I have found otherwise.
Tell you what, I'd love to see Steve Hassan come on here and debate you, Scott. I think that'd be fantastic.
Oh, I would love to twist him around.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, but this is where I think you don't do yourself any favors. Last week we had one of the best anti-MLMers, or the week before, come onto your show. You guys had a fantastic discussion, and then you called her a nut job, which I think is the reason why she's not here today, which I'm very sad about, because I was really, really looking forward to me, you, Peter, and Julie Anderson having another great discussion.
Well, I called her a nut job before she came on the show, and she knew it. So that's not something that came up during the show.
Well, it didn't come up, but I think anyone who listened to that discussion would have been surprised at the end of it for you to call her a nut job. Because, I mean, she's not a nut job. She may have a few different opinions to you, but she's not a nut job. I mean, someone who's a nut job is someone, a nut job is someone who's mentally unstable, who, can't work, can't participate in the world, That's not her. She's a person who, high functioning, speaks a lot of sense, speaks calmly and rationally. I mean, sure, I get you disagree with some of the things she says, but she's not a nut job.
Well, I would not agree that she's calm and rational. If you watch some of her videos, I mean, her eyeballs roll around and her hands are thrown up in the air, and she laughs sort of at random times. It's just weird.
Okay, yeah, I think she's passionate about it because she understands the damage that these companies are doing to people. Some people can talk about it calmly, other people get a little bit emotional. I don't think that makes them a nut job to be upset that you've got, literally, MLM has had a major negative impact on millions of people's lives. Millions of people have been brainwashed by this evil cult. I don't think it's surprising that she gets a little bit emotional about it.
Yeah, and that's her choice, but I would say that not only does she show a lot of emotion, she doesn't say much that's very meaningful.
I thought it was a very, very meaningful discussion that you and her had last week.
I mean, on her videos, she doesn't say a lot that's very meaningful.
Did you see the one where me and her were on for about 4 hours? I thought that was she didn't do anything in that 4 hours that I thought would make you think she's a nut job. Did you see that one?
Well, yeah, and what struck me about that 4-hour show you did with her is that there were several topics that were brought up that instead of trying to find a solution, all you guys did was complain back and forth and say, look how bad that is, and how bad this is, and how bad this is. But you never thought about, it never came up during that show, and go back and listen to the show again.
Yeah.
There were several topics that if you guys had said, you know what, if there were retail sales, this wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, well, I disagree.
Well, listen to it again.
I said during that 4 hours that the solution is for all of us to contact the politicians and say, we know you're taking money from the Amway Corporation. If you continue to do so, we are not going to support you anymore. We need to write to the mainstream media and let them know that there's a lot of people who really, really, really dislike the multi-level marketing industry and who have been hurt by it. Show them the data. 99.7% of people lose money. I mean, the fact that you've got major soccer teams that have Herbalife on their shirts, I can guarantee you, if 1% of Marco's massive audience was to message these soccer teams and say, hey, you've got Herbalife on your jersey, this is a company that has a 99 point something loss rate, I guarantee you they wouldn't take that sponsorship. But I think the problem is that there's a lot of us, but we aren't complaining to the right people. The fact that
there's not enough people complaining. Most people are just there to be entertained by whoever is doing the show, and they really have no interest in actually doing anything. It's very similar to when you get people in MLM. You know, they get scared, they get frustrated, and they quit. And that's people, whether it's MLM or complaining about MLMs. Most people just sit there and watch and want to be entertained, and they don't want to actually do anything.
But Scott, the reason why people are quitting is because they're involved in a business where over 99% of people lose money. It is not a wise thing to do to continue in any sort of business that has a 99% plus loss ratio. You are better off statistically to go to a casino. It is statistically far better to go to a casino. The people that quit aren't quitting because they're lazy or because they're unmotivated or because they've got stinking thinking. They're making a very rational decision. Leaving a business with a 99 point something % loss rate is a very sensible, rational thing to do. And I've got no doubt if the vast overwhelming majority of people who join these MLMs are joining unaware of the fact there's a 99% plus loss ratio. That's the big thing. If the MLMs had to have full disclosure, they would die instantly. And that's why they've fought very, very hard to not have full disclosure. If they had the same disclosure that, say, a McDonald's had to have, the game would be over very quickly. And they know that, and they've fought against having any disclosure. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but I also would say that you changed the subject. I was talking about not too many people complain, and then you said there's a big loss rate. So, you know, when you change the subject like that, then we don't really have a conversation. We have you talking your idea and me talking my idea, and we're not really exchanging thoughts.
I think people are, their complaints are sort of a bit misguided maybe. I feel like complaining to the FTC is a waste of time because this is a political fix. The people who work at the FTC know that they know there's a 99% loss rate. They know that Amway and Herbalife and Primerica should be shut down, but they also know that the FTC is funded by the US government, and the US government is getting huge donations from every single MLM company. They also know that if you're high up at the FTC, if you don't close these companies down, when you leave the FTC, you'll be given a job with a huge wage at companies like Herbalife, Amway, and Primerica. The lady I saw recently who famously made that speech where she said, we didn't say that Herbalife was not a pyramid scheme. She's now working for one of these companies. So this is a fix. This is an inside job. Complaining to the FTC is a waste of time. I think the letters that are going to the FTC
this company has all the hallmarks of a pyramid scheme. Isn't that right? It sounds like what you're saying is that this company has all the hallmarks of a pyramid scheme. Isn't that right?
You know, our focus isn't on the label. The word pyramid does not appear in our complaint. That is true. They were not determined not to have been a pyramid.
It sounds like what you're saying is that this company had all the hallmarks of a pyramid scheme. Isn't that right?
Our focus isn't on the label. The word pyramid does
directed
not
at the
appear in our
politicians
complaint.
who
That
take
is
these
true.
bribes.
They were
And that's what these are. These
not
aren't donations,
determined
they're
not
bribes.
to have been a pyramid.
The MLM industry
Why not do both?
will do both. But if you've only got time to write one letter, write it to your member of parliament, send it to. Actually, this is what I advise people to do: write one letter, and then send it to every single politician in America or Australia or wherever you live. You've got to write the letter once, and then you just got to stick in all the emails and send them to all of them. I also urge people to write to people in the mainstream media. Are you aware of the what's her name? Leah Remini? She was in Scientology.
Yes.
She did a great big expose on Scientology. She then received, I think it must have been an orchestrated campaign by survivors of Jehovah's Witness. And they all wrote to her and said pretty much the same thing. Scientology is very, very similar to Jehovah's Witness, the practices. She then did a documentary series on the Jehovah's Witness program. So I think if we could get 1 or 2% of someone like Marco's audience to write to Leah, Remy, and say Amway is identical. A lot of the practices are very, very similar to Jehovah's Witness and Scientology. If she was to do an expose on it, that would do far, far, far more damage than anything that's been tried so far. So that's what I urge people to do. Write to Leah Remy. Send an email, not just to your local politician, but to every single politician in your country. And they need to know that the public are becoming aware of this scam, this rort of MLM companies giving huge donations to all sides of politics, and then the politicians pretending Amway is not a problem, even though they know damn well it is, and people at the FTC too scared to do their job properly. I've got no doubt there's people at the FTC that agree with me, but they know that would be a very, very, very bad career move.
Well, do you think the FTC lost the Neora lawsuit intentionally?
I don't know a lot about it, but I would like to know how much money that company has given to the politicians. Make no mistake, the FTC. Do you really think that the FTC are not aware that Amway is a scam?
I believe they are aware, and what they told me a few years ago, because I tried to direct them towards my website, because it has a lot of good information on it. They told me that they need a minimum number of people complaining, and then they will start an investigation, and that's their process. So
that's nonsense, though, because they've closed down smaller MLMs.
That's their process. So when you have people like Julie Anderson saying that the FTC is a waste of time, or other people saying the same thing, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot, because the FTC has told me personally that's how we operate.
That's nonsense, though. I'm not doubting that they've told you that. But what was the name of that energy drink MLM they shut down? I guarantee you that there was less complaints about that energy drink MLM that the FTC successfully shut down that was not similar to Amway, but identical. It was a copycat version of Amway. They shut them down.
That was Vima, and the reason it was so similar to Amway is because the guy that owns that company, BK Barenko, is a former Amway direct distributor, and his parents were, I think, either Double Diamonds or EDCs. They were very, very high in the structure in Amway. So, yes, it was very similar to Amway, and I think what happened was there was a lot of students, particularly in Arizona State University, which is where Vima was headquartered in a nearby suburb. And I think what happened was a lot of the students believed what they were being told. You ought to take some of your money that your parents are giving you, or your scholarship, or wherever you're getting your money to pay for college, and put it towards Vima, because you're just going to squander your money and you're going to have a job the rest of your life. It's not going to pay you. You'll get laid off all the time. And if you join VEMA, you'll get filthy rich. And young college students, believe that. And so I think a lot of the parents, when they found out about this, a lot of them were probably influential, right? They had some money and they had some political connections. And so I don't know what the number of complaints was, but I do agree that the people complaining probably had more political connections than your average MLMer. And I think, I don't know this, but I think that's why VEMA got the attention, and most other MLMs don't, whether it's Amway or any other MLM.
Hang on, but do we agree that over the last 50 years, there's been more complaints made to the FTC about the Amway Corporation than VEMA?
I have no idea.
But if you had to guess, my guess would be there's been far more complaints made to the FTC about the Amway Corporation than VEMA. So the idea that
I don't think so, because
investigating Amway because there's not enough people complaining is ridiculous.
Most people who drop out of Amway are not even aware they were scammed. They're being told if you fail, it's your fault. And they believe that. People believe that if they fail, it's their fault. They believe their upline when their upline tells them that. So why would you complain to the FTC if you thought it was your fault that you failed?
But there's also a lot of people who know that Amway is a scam and have made complaints to the FTC, and that has not worked. The FTC, I think you'd have to be naive to think that there's not people high at the FTC who know that if I was to do my job properly and close down Amway, that's going to have a negative impact on the FTC as a whole getting funding and my chances of getting a job advising or working for an MLM company when I leave the FTC. Make no mistake, people who work at the FTC are very, very aware of the fact that for their own narrow personal benefit, leave Amway alone, leave Herbalife alone, close down the odd little MLM company here and there so we have the public perception that, the FTC want to close down MLMs. We need to get politicians talking about MLMs. There's only ever been one Australian politician who has talked about the multi-level marketing industry in Parliament. One in the history of Australian politics. That's bizarre. And I'm not aware of any USA politicians who have ever spoken about it.
I'm not aware of anyone either. Peter, can you think of a politician that's spoken out against MLM scams?
No, for some reason, politicians have a tendency of leaving these MLM companies alone, including, Donald Trump, who was obviously somebody who owned his own MLM, and he spoke for many of them and even had MLM on The Apprentice television show that he had. There is one thing that I just want to kind of clarify. So Glenn made a point that it's common for people to go between government agencies and then the private or public corporations, and kind of like in a circular fashion. And they're on the FTC, and then Herbalife needs somebody who knows the FTC, so they hire them, and that happens not only in MLM, but it happens all the time, and it's one of the biggest problems in our political system. There should really be an ordinance, if you will, or a policy where if you're working with a government agency, you basically have like a 5-year window where you cannot do something like that. But that would probably not be very popular because many of the people in our fine U.S. government are as crooked can get. Having said that, though, Edith Ramirez was an acting FTC chairperson. She did whatever she did with Herbalife, and she's very well known for having said that statement. We never said you weren't not a pyramid, whatever that meant. But she let them off the hook with a $200 million fine. But what she did not do is Edith Ramirez, when she left, she did not go to an MLM company. She went to a law firm, and she focuses on privacy, cybersecurity, and a whole bunch of other things. So she was not one of the people that went through that circular government, private company or public company thing where basically everybody's washing each other's hands. That's not the case in many things, but Edith Ramirez was not one of those people. What she did not do was, I think, what she should have done, which is given them a heavier fine. We're talking about Herbalife. And what she didn't do is she didn't really sit up on top of them to make sure that they did the things that they were supposed to do. And maybe that's partly political because Herbalife, and Scott and I discussed a lot of this when it was going on, but to rehash it, Herbalife is very smart when it comes to understanding the political environment. So they hired all the politicians, including our Vice President, Kamala Harris, her husband's law firm. They hire lots of MLM attorneys. This way, the federal government can't go hire an MLM attorney who's hired already by Herbalife. So they put a lot of MLM attorneys on retainer. So it's kind of like a lot of MLM attorneys are lucky that they're MLM attorneys because they get paid off just to sit on the sideline. So they can't be hired against them. And those are some of the downsides of not just the MLM industry, but industry in general. And, people like Ralph Nader and, the guy we used to do a radio show with, Jim Turner. These are the things that they've been fighting with for decades, if not 100 years. So your points, Glenn, are well-founded, but some of them may not be accurate relative specifically to Edith Ramirez. Now, let's move forward just a little bit.
But make no mistake, there was enough evidence for that company to be closed. That company should have been closed down. That decision to only fine them $200 million is an absolute disgrace. And it's an absolute tragedy that people in the media did not analyze that case more, because if the media had analyzed that case, there would have been consensus that the FTC acted in a shameful fashion, because there was so much evidence. It was undeniable. Herbalife was breaking the law. They were doing the wrong thing. They had a 99-point-something loss rate. They should have been shut down.
Let me interrupt you. Yeah, let me interrupt you for just 1 second. To add credibility to what you are saying, is there was a hedge fund manager, still is, named Bill Ackman, and he's a guy that manages people's money in a hedge fund. So when he says something, especially when he says something and mentions a dollar amount on how he spent his hedge fund resources, it better be right, otherwise he's going to get sued by all the people that do the investing. He said he invested over $50 million in researching Herbalife to prove what you just said. So the only reason why I want to mention that is because sometimes we can throw away or throw around sentences, phrases, ideas, pseudo facts. But Bill Ackman did spend $50 million, and lots of it was well spent, and lots of it, I believe, what you say, I don't know if it should have had Herbalife shut down, but it should have had Herbalife readjusted. And when I say by readjusted, they should have been put in a position where they had to right their wrongs, which probably, so this is my guess, would have eventually led to their shutdown. So I think they should have been adjusted, reprimanded,